thank you to Natalie and Flonia and Navtab and the people who spoke earlier, and just to everyone who's working so hard to support my mom's campaign here in Cincinnati and across Ohio. I'm incredibly grateful for all that so many of you have already done, and if it's not too presumptuous to echo Natalie, all that you will do over the next couple weekends and the next 13 days until the polls close on November 8th. Depending on your perspective, that either feels like it's just right around the corner or still quite a ways away. Both of those are true for me every day. I either feel like, oh my gosh, the election's almost here, or oh my gosh, the election is still almost 2 weeks away. But I remain convinced that if we continue to contextualize this election and what is really at stake for our lives, for our families, for our communities, for our country, we will have a really strong showing on November 8th, not only at the top of the ticket for my mom, but all the way down the ballot, because we have to turn Ohio blue up and down the ballot, and I know we'll do that with your support. So I just am so thankful. Oh gosh, please sit down. I'm gonna stay standing, but please sit down. Goodness gracious, it makes me feel like we're all so formal, and I'm like back to being in The Wizard of Oz, my first grade play, where I think all the parents were so nervous, like everybody stood the whole time. I'm so thankful to have the chance to advocate on behalf of my mom in this election, partly because I couldn't imagine a better mom or role model, and it would be remiss to not mention that it's her birthday today. So I'm really particularly excited to be here with all of you on her birthday. But for me now, my most important identity is as a mom to my 2-year-old daughter, Charlotte, and my 4-month-old son, Aiden. Because I've realized that the reason I have such an intense feeling about this election, even more than my mom running, and I am fiercely, ridiculously proud of my mom and totally biased towards her, is because I now have children in the world whose lives and future will be shaped by whomever we elect to succeed President Obama. And so I just want to share a few thoughts about this election and then open it up to your questions or your comments. And I love seeing the Stanford sweatshirts. I was briefly at my 15-year reunion on Friday night, so I've been thinking about the farm a lot. Because I hope that you'll give me the chance to help further equip you with whatever you think might be useful as you continue to make the case over the next 13 days to people who are making plans to vote early or want to wait until Election Day, but just helping everyone understand it's not an option to stay on the sidelines for this election. I think this is the most important presidential election of my lifetime. And I do feel that way in part because I am a parent. I also feel that way in part because I think everything I care most about is on the ballot. The progress that President Obama has made, that I think he gets far too little credit for having made, is on the ballot, and the opportunities for further progress. I also think our values are on the ballot. I never thought I would see in my lifetime the almost daily diet of hate speech that seems to be Donald Trump's main campaign strategy. The racism, the sexism, the Islamophobia, the homophobia, the rhetoric against Americans, the rhetoric against our veterans, Americans with disabilities, immigrants. I mean, none of that is what I want for our country, and it certainly doesn't represent the country that I want my children, your grandchildren to grow up in. And so for me, this election is about two things. Fundamentally. It's about both defeating Donald Trump and about electing my mom. It's about defeating Donald Trump because I think we have to send a strong message that love does Trump hate, and that can't just be a slogan. In the same way, I think we have to send a strong message that stronger together isn't a slogan either. And I want a president who has been working for longer than I've been alive to make a positive difference in the lives of children and families and women. I'm so grateful that when I went to first grade, I knew what legal aid was because my mom was the chair of the Legal Services Corporation of America, and she would share stories about the work that she was doing. And I'm so proud that when I was in first grade, I knew my mom was working to make our public schools in Arkansas better. Because back in the 1980s, depending on the year, Arkansas either had the 49th or the 50th public school system in our country. And I'm so proud that when I was a teenager, my mom talked about healthcare reform over the dinner table. And I'm really proud that when her efforts in 93 and 94 didn't work out, she didn't give up. I mean, even Donald Trump had to concede that she certainly isn't a quitter. And because she didn't give up, we have now more than 8 million children who have health insurance across our country. I've lost count of the number of young people, and now even not so young people, people my age, who come up to me and say, I was able to get the 5 heart surgeries I needed because of the Children's Health Insurance Program, or I was able to get early intervention for my diabetes, or I'm alive because of the chemotherapy treatment I got for my leukemia. I've also lost track of the number of young people who've come up to me and said, I know that I was adopted out of the foster care system because of your mother's work. Or I know that my dad, who was a 9/11 first responder, got the health care he needed and is still getting the health care that he needs because of your mom's work. So to me, this election is both about repudiating Donald Trump's divisive, demeaning, degrading rhetoric that should offend all of us, even if we're not the people in his crossfire on any given day. And it's also about affirmatively supporting a candidate who has been making a positive difference in people's lives for longer than I can even remember. And so right now, I think I have the 2 best jobs in the world. I get to be my kid's mom, and I get to, in the best sense, every day get up and talk about why I'm so proud to be my mother's daughter. And I just hope that my children are even a smidgen as proud of me as I am of my mom. I hope they have just like an ounce of the enthusiasm for me that I certainly have for my mom, because I am so proud of her, and I just can't believe it's her birthday, and so I get to smile even a little bit wider today than I do most days. So just thank you all so much, and I hope you'll ask questions if you have questions, or if you have advice for the next 13 days. I'm always really curious to hear what more people think we can and should be doing. You clearly know Cincinnati a lot better than I do, so if you think there are things that we should be doing here, please let me know. I love the pantsuit t-shirt that I see in the back. And so again, just thank you so much, and thank you to Moms Demand Action for always being at my events in Ohio, and thank you for all that you're doing, because gun violence prevention is something else I didn't know I could care more about until I became a parent. So please, I hope you'll ask questions or offer advice or share stories if you'd like to do that. But while you're thinking about something you may want to share or ask, please just give all my moms, organizers, and volunteers who are working so hard here a massive round of applause. And if no one raises their hands, I'll just pick issues to talk about or stories to share. And I would say you don't have to be old enough to vote to ask a question. Oh gosh, yes sir, with the camera.
So glad you were there for the 15th. We were just there for our 40th. And we crashed in on the 2001ers. They were cool, all the little kids. The thing that I'm more upset about than Trump is the Trump supporters and this shared vision that they have that government can't do anything good. So that, old Kennedy mantra, what can you do for your country? We're totally lost for that now. And so it seems to me like we've got to get back to that vision that government can do good, and we can do good for each other and for common good. How do we see a path back to that?
So thank you for your question. Something that I've really observed now, having been out campaigning for my mom over the last many months, is I think we really have collectively failed by not teaching civics any longer. Only a dozen states require civics. When I was in public school in Arkansas, I had civics in 5th grade and 8th grade. And that's just not the norm now for so many students across our country. And I say that because I think Donald Trump has masterfully exploited that. So when he says things like, well, when I'm president, my Supreme Court, I think, well, no, it's actually no president's Supreme Court. FDR tried and thankfully was thwarted in making it his Supreme Court. Or when he says, when I'm president, some variation of Speaker Ryan's going to have to listen to me. Like, well, no. I mean, I hope he's not Speaker Ryan, with all due respect, come January, but no, actually, the Speaker of the House doesn't have to listen to you. There's some things like tax legislation that originates in Congress, and the president has to respond to that. And so I don't expect most people to maybe know that level of nuance, but I think we have to get back to teaching civics so that people understand what they should expect out of a president or a governor or a mayor. Because the president has incredible opportunities and also faces significant constitutional constraints. And there's some things that a mayor has more control over. I mean, as sort of one relatively non-threatening, but I wish kind of more common example, recycling, right? A mayor and a county commissioner, city councils have a lot more control over recycling than a president does. If you really care about criminal justice reform, it really matters who the president is, who's sitting in Congress, who's sitting in the governor's office, who's sitting in the state legislature, who's sitting in the mayor's office, who's sitting in the city council, who's sitting in the district attorney's office. So I just think we have to get back to teaching civics so that people understand kind of where to channel their hopes and also their frustrations for government. I also think we have to prove that, to your point, that government can work and does work with leadership that is mutually committed to solving big challenges. And until we had 17 Republicans running for president, we actually were starting to have real movement at the national level on certain questions: comprehensive immigration reform, the need to address our heroin and opioid epidemic, more Republicans saying they might consider increasing investments in early childhood education. So I'm hopeful that with my mom's a strong record of being able to find common ground in early childhood education, to support our veterans, to support foster care youth, I hope that she can take that record and remind Republicans and Democrats of things they were saying and committing to not that long ago, so that we can prove to our country that kind of with the right type of leadership and also partnership, we really can get a lot done. So I think we have to teach civics, and I think we have to get back to kind of having big, bold progress. And I think we can do both, but we have to get my mom elected first on November 8th to do that. So yeah, thank you. I saw another hand. Yes, sir, in the green and yellow.
I'm Joseph, and I was wondering if anything could be done for the kids, some that get targeted for psych meds that don't need them. It's an abusive thing in school. And by the way, I made that Hill got billed on Capitol Hill, and I want to know about that for the kids.
So in school settings?
Yeah, they target a lot of kids for psych meds that don't necessarily need them, and it ruins them in the long run.
So thank you for asking your question. We do now have a lot of research that says we have been over-medicating kids in a number of ways. And so we have to have a response both to help the kids who may have been over-medicated, not through any fault of their own, and also to help ensure going forward that doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, as well as parents know kind of what questions to be asking, what conversations to be having, so that children aren't inappropriately medicated in the future, while also kids who do need interventions are getting them. And so my mom thinks we have to do a couple of things. Something that my mom did when she was a senator was to work on legislation to require drug companies to start doing the necessary research to be able to say what drug dosages children should actually have. Because until that legislation was passed, just over a decade ago, drug companies would just guess. So they would look at you or they would look at me and they would say, well, this is what we know an adult man or adult woman should take. And if kids are maybe somewhere between a third and a fourth the size of us, well, then probably they just need a third or a fourth of the dosage, which is not true, but is how drug companies, up until that point, had decided kind of what the recommended dosage was for kids. So at least now drug companies have to do the research to say, well, this is what an adult man might need, this is what an adult woman might need, and oh, by the way, here's what is appropriate and not appropriate for kids. But we know we need to be doing more of that, particularly in areas related to the brain, because of how quickly kids' brains develop. I mean, our brains change really rapidly, particularly in the first few years of life, during puberty. And so having more requirements for the drug companies to do more real research, to understand, particularly at those sensitive moments, what are appropriate dosages and what may even be inappropriate medicines to ever give a child, is important. And that's something that my mom can push for in the Senate and something she'll continue to work on as president. We also need more training of our doctors and our nurse practitioners, and even the nurses who have kind of prescription writing authority, so that people know what's appropriate and not, and more continuing education, so that as new research comes out, particularly as relates to kids, doctors and nurses are doing kind of what is in line with the best research. Because doctors and nurse practitioners, of course, want to do what's right for kids in the same way that as parents we want to do what's right for kids. We just need to know a lot more than we know now, and we need to have a broader conversation about how we do that, and also what we do kind of through schools and out-of-school programs to help support the kids who have been over-medicated, so hopefully they can, in the best sense, rediscover who they are and be supported in that. So thank you you're the first person that's ever asked me that question, and I think it's such an important one, particularly as a mom. So thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you, sir. Yes.
Thank you for coming today. We really appreciate it. I wanted to see if you know specifically, if elected, what Secretary Clinton would do in regards to the Social Security funding shortfall.
So thank you for asking the question about Social Security, and thank you for being a young person wearing a Take a Stand t-shirt. I always find it so affirming when young people ask questions about Social Security or Medicare, because of course we have a stake in those programs. I mean, I like to think I'm going to live long enough to be on Social Security and Medicare. You laugh, but I do. I hope I live long enough. What was so, in some ways, I mean, my first reaction during the debate last week when Donald Trump made his nasty woman comment was, oh my gosh, now no one's going to pay attention to Social Security, which is actually what they were talking about when he made that comment. And sure enough, no one's paid attention to the conversation about Social Security. So, one, we have to have an agreement about what our shortfall actually is. And that may seem obvious, but 10 years ago, that was not true. We didn't even have an agreement around what kind of the horizon was for Social Security and what the funding shortfall would be. Thankfully, we now have a clear bipartisan sense of what the challenge is, and everyone's agreed that the Congressional Budget Office has a clear view that should be respected and a call for action. Two, we certainly cannot allow any further efforts to rob the Social Security Trust Fund. We have to protect the Social Security Trust Fund as it is today. Three, we can never allow efforts to privatize Social Security, something that my mom voted against consistently in the Senate. And four, we clearly know we have to do more to replenish the funding. And my mom has said that she would look at a range of options, including raising the cap or raising additional taxes, but that this has to be a first-term priority for her because we have to ensure that Social Security is solvent for our grandparents, our parents, and also for us. But we have to continue to stop efforts to raid the trust fund, continue to stop efforts to privatize it, agree on what the challenge actually is, and then tackle the challenge. And I am actually hopeful that we will make progress in this area, because at least we now agree on what the challenge is. And I think we've now convinced the Republicans that we will never allow Social Security to be privatized. So thank you for your question, and thank you for being a young person focused on this question. Oh gosh, yes ma'am, in the peach or orange.
I'm an older person who's a year away from Social Security, but that's not the topic. My daughter lives in California, has a wonderful job in data science, and has private health care. She cannot afford, on her good salary in California, to buy her mental health prescription. United Healthcare, one of the places that pulled out of Obamacare, is charging her $400 for an antidepressant a month. And to fight that, she got a letter back from United Healthcare that said you have to try 7 other drugs before, which we already know, she's already eliminated other ones when she was on Obamacare in a postdoc at UT. So, you know, her doctor's supposed to fight that. That's the only person that can fight that. It's just like the EpiPen. We need to do more to say to insurers that they can't dictate what a person should pay for, or what they should get or what they should not get. So I'd love for your mom to work on that.
So thank you for your question, and thank you for asking it in such an open, calm way, because what you've demonstrated is why we have to move away from the stigma around mental health, too. I mean, as my mom said a couple weeks ago when we were together in Philadelphia, she's so tired of people treating health as only what happens from the neck down. We need to have a sense of our whole health. And I was so, just when I think I can't get more distraught by something that Donald Trump says, I was so distraught with what he said about our veterans with PTSD. You know, because A, we should always respect our veterans, and B, we owe it to our veterans to ensure that every veteran gets the support she or he needs. But C, there's no shame attached to PTSD or any mental health challenge. I mean, more than 1 out of 5 American adults will have some mental health challenge in our lifetime. I don't know if that's going to be you or me or your children or my children. It is her daughter, right? This can happen to any of us. So we have to stop the stigmatization, and we have to ensure that the mental health parity, as it's now written into law, is actually being met with practice, which is, I think, where your question really falls. So a couple of things. One, we have to have a public option in every state so that there's real competition, and also a real base level of good healthcare coverage for anyone, regardless of what our health or relative challenges might be. And 2, we have to finally get something done that my mom first fought for back in 1993, which is to empower Medicare to negotiate with drug companies. Currently, the VA negotiates with drug companies. That's something the Republicans voted for. So hopefully we can remind them of that and encourage them to vote for empowering Medicare to do the same. Because the reason that would be good for not just people on Medicare, but also for those of us not on Medicare yet, like those of us not on Social Security yet, is because Medicare pricing is totally transparent. Right? You can go on to the government website now and see how much Medicare is paying for anything in California or here in Cincinnati. And so it would be really hard for the drug companies to charge those of us not on Medicare yet, you know, even 3 times, much less 300 times what they would be charging someone on Medicare. So we have to have more competition in the insurance market, and we have to use the purchasing power of the government to help lower drug costs for people throughout the system, those on Medicare and those on not Medicare yet. So thank you for your question, and thank you for how you asked your question, because that's exactly how we should be talking about mental health as if it were any other health challenge. So thank you. Oh gosh, in the pantsuit t-shirt.
There has been such a strong effort to encourage and mobilize millennial voters in this election. And following the election at the start of the Clinton presidency for the next 4 and hopefully 8 years, how do we continue to encourage and mobilize and support millennial voters who sometimes have this just apathetic view of politics and don't really understand how much that it does affect them every day?
So thank you for asking your question, and I really want your T-shirt. And thank you for being focused on future elections. And I knocked on the stool. I'm going to knock on my head, knock on wood. My mom wins, and Democrats win on November 8th. One of the reasons I answered the first question in the way I did about civics is that I wish people of all ages, but particularly young people, understood how much is at stake every time there's an election. Who your mayor is and who your governor is say a lot about your public school system. Who your president is and who your governor and state legislatures are, say a lot about what's going to happen or not on public colleges and universities and student loan reform. So I would just hope that young voters think about what they care most intensely about. And how, yes, it's hugely on the ballot in this election because I don't think we've ever had a clearer choice about our values as well. But really, so much of what I hear young voters say they care about is on every ballot. And when I'm on college and university campuses, the questions I get asked the most about relate to higher education affordability, criminal justice reform, the environment, and particularly for very young voters, gun violence prevention. All of those are impacted by who's sitting in the White House, but also in the governor's office and in the mayor's office and in the legislative branches, kind of up and down the ladder. So I would just hope that for someone like you who clearly understands that, you can just continue to talk to your friends about why not only should they not stay on the sidelines in this election, they should not stay on the sidelines in any election. I mean, if you wouldn't let someone else pick out what you're going to wear on a given day, why would you let someone else vote for you? It makes no sense to me. Admittedly, that's also how I was raised, and I'm really grateful that my parents took me to vote with them as a little kid. So I hope that for the little kids here, you'll go with your parents to vote. I took my daughter to vote in the New York primary. My son wasn't born yet. I'll take both my daughter and son to vote on election day. We don't have early voting in New York, so I have to do it the old-fashioned way and go on election day. So I hope that, for those of you that have children, have grandchildren, have kids in your life, you'll take them with you to vote so that they also see kind of you voting, and that's just part of being an American, that it is one of our great privileges and also one of our responsibilities. So thank you for recognizing that in this election and for all elections. And I know that we're out of time, but I just, again, want to thank you all for all you have done, and again, all that you can do over the next 13 days to just talk to your family, your friends, total strangers about what's at stake in this election, about why you're supporting my mom, whether it relates to Social Security, mental health care, or anything else. Thank you so much.